Gotta keep up with me mentally. I finesse it just so gently. Gotta keep up with me mentally.
What is good, GBO crew, and welcome back to another episode of the TalkToMeNice podcast. And here at the TalkToMeNice podcast, I pick a topic and we chop it up, just me and you. Please be sure to follow me on Instagram because that is where I ask you guys a question so we can discuss whatever we got going on over here. Before we get into this topic, I'm gonna need you to click the link in my description box, and also please hit that subscribe button as well. And with no further ado, let's just get right into this video. So I'm not even going to lie to you guys, I literally have started over my intro to this episode about 4 or 5 times simply because, I don't know, I feel like my lighting is weird. I don't really know what it is. It could be because I don't have my desk, which is also a very weird thing. When I say my desk, I meant an old box I used to use. But nonetheless, let's focus. Let's really back in. I got so much good feedback on the last episode of the podcast, and I told myself, I was like, okay, I am going to do better in 2021. So my goal is that at least once a month, and I'm going to aim for Tuesday, at least one Tuesday in the month where I will upload a Talk to Me Nice podcast episode. I can't do it every single Tuesday. I already upload 2 times a week, and that would just be overkill. As you can see by today's title, it's a little political, I guess. It's a little heavy, but it's kind of a comparison and contrast type of thing. This is a topic where I didn't necessarily ask you guys anything. I've kind of spoken about it on my social medias. If you follow me on Twitter and on Instagram, I've kind of talked about them briefly, but I wanted to take a podcast episode to go a little bit more in depth with my thoughts and feelings. It was kind of hard to really find a way to pose a question for this, because the only other logical question I would think to ask you guys is like, how did what happened at Capitol Hill affect you, or what are your opinions about it, which you guys can freely do in the comments right now. So I decided we better do it this way. So it is kind of weird not having like my little bubbles where you guys tell me what you guys thought, but because I am trying to do better at this whole podcasting, I want to have some little mini segments within like our videos. So I picked up this cool thing from Target today because, child, they are all ready for Black History Month, okay? There's this game called Culture Tags, and no, this is not sponsored. I picked it up, and this was also $25, but look, for the culture. So yes, these are all like fun little sayings that, like, pretty much if you're Black, or maybe not, you'll know. So it's like Black Twitter, church, daily sayings, family, friends, film, TV songs, lyrics, words to live by. And so there are acronyms. So before each episode, there should be enough where I can at least get through the entire year. I'm gonna pick a card from the deck, and you guys are gonna guess what the acronym stands for. So our first one for today, okay, can you guys see that? It's probably flipped in the camera, but it says KTSE. So you guys go ahead and get in your head your guesses for what you think this acronym stands for. And this is a Black Twitter thing, so if you're Black and you be on Twitter, you probably know what this stands for. This is like the only one I think I have right. I'm trying to look at the answer on the back of the card, but this is the only one that I think I had right. So you guys go ahead and pick your guesses, and at the end of this episode, I'll let you guys know what the correct one is. And also, I wanted to ask you guys, when I do a topic where I don't necessarily ask you guys like opinions about it, or it's not necessarily a question, I thought, with that segment as well, I would also have like a what are you watching segment, like what are you guys watching on streaming platforms like Netflix or Hulu or things like that. So hashtag what are you watching. And so next time I'll be sure to include that on Instagram, so you guys can tell me what you guys are into or what you guys are thinking about watching. Right now, the last week or so, I decided to watch Bones, the TV show, from start to finish, because I don't think I ever have actually watched it. I remember in high school and middle school, like, getting home from basketball practice, I would do that. I would watch that show while doing my homework. So I've been kind of watching it because I want to see the progression of Bones and Booth's relationship, like, and throughout the season. So as you can see, Capitol Hill versus Black Lives Matter protest. We are just going to jump right in. There's really no segue into this topic. You kind of just have to jump right into it. All right, let me get my notes out. Y'all know it's serious when I got the notes, okay? So I have 3 main points that I'm going to highlight as we talk about Capitol Hill versus the Black Lives Matter protests. So the first one is the motive behind each of them. The second one is how they were handled. And the last point is, what does this mean? So the first one, the motive behind each. Okay, we're going to start with the Black Lives Matter protests. All right, so here is my definition. The Black Lives Matter protests were to amplify the voices of the victims and their families who lost their loved ones' lives to police brutality or race-motivated murders. That's what Black Lives Matter means to me. I'm sure there's a better definition that you guys can Google. You guys can go on the website and they will tell you everything that Black Lives Matter stands for. But the protests that we had this summer were for that reason. We were trying to amplify Black voices. Secondly, what was the goal for the Black Lives Matter protests? We wanted to see change in our system, for police to be held accountable for their actions, social justice, equality, etc. Everything that you can think of. That was the main goal of having these protests. We wanted to see actual change occur in our system, and we have seen small things. We've had small victories. I mean, obviously with this election, more people have voted and things like that, but it's clear that we still have a lot of work to do, but it's important that we do take the time to celebrate the small victories. We've had, some racist flags and symbols and statues been taken down and removed, all those types of things, which is great, but it's time we really start focusing on like actual change within the system, defunding the police and holding people accountable for their actions, no matter what their rank is in society, holding police accountable, holding everybody accountable for their actions, because every action has a consequence. So let's move on to the Capitol. What was the motive behind the protests at Capitol Hill? And quite frankly, since I'm not a Trump supporter, I'm not pro-Trump, I'm not any of that, I can only assume that the things I'm about to list were a part of the motive for what happened at Capitol Hill. Expressing their anger at the fact that their president did not get reelected. They simply just did not get what they wanted this go round. And also, I feel like the tipping point was obviously the Democrats taking control of the Senate, which they also were not happy about. Once again, I don't know, because I don't really know what goes through their heads or how this even came about. So as you can see, what happened at Capitol Hill, what happened during Black Lives Matter protests, each of them have a motive. And as you can see, the motives between the two are very different. We were protesting because we wanted to see change. We wanted these Black lives and the families and the victims to finally get justice. And with Capitol Hill, it's more of a selfish motive when you think about it, because it's like they simply just did not get what they want. Trump didn't get reelected, and it's basically like, let's just have a temper tantrum. The Democrats are now control of the Senate. We also did not get what we wanted there, so we are just going to storm the Capitol. The only thing that I don't have down for the Capitol is the goal. I am not quite sure what was the end game for storming Capitol Hill. I don't know what point they were trying to prove, other than the fact that they can simply do what they want, but we gonna get into that. But just as you can see, the stark contrast between Black Lives Matter protests and what happened at Capitol Hill, two different things. They are not the same, and I stress that on my Instagram story. If you in any way, shape, or form think that what happened at Capitol Hill is the same thing as what happened this past summer with Black Lives Matter, you have got the game messed up. Moving on to our second point, how they were handled. It is almost clear as day. Like, there is no mud in the water, okay? It is giving Fiji. The way that the protesters were handled at Capitol Hill and the way that protesters during a Black Lives Matter protest were handled are starkly different. And I think that's where you really see the biggest contrast in between the two. So let's start with the Black Lives Matter protests. I am going to put a link to a Twitter thread where you guys can see videos of multiple instances where the police are treating protesters pretty much just... It's a long thread. You're gonna get the gist when you see. I spent so much time on social media this summer, just looking at all the videos, seeing all these protests, and it was inspiring at the same time, and it moved me. But then there was also like the bad side of it too, because I was seeing like up close and personal, without even being there, how these protests were being treated, and it wasn't always the greatest thing to watch. But I would say, I'm not even sure this is like 100% correct, but I would personally say that 85 to 90% of these protests that I saw all started off peaceful until violence was instigated by police or people that had a personal vendetta against Black Lives Matter. And when I say a personal vendetta, I mean like people that would go to these protests with their own agenda. Like, they're not here for Black Lives Matter. They don't care about any of that. They don't care about, you know, the George Floyds, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice's, Sandra Bland. They don't care about any of that. They have their own personal agenda. And I personally saw so many videos where things would turn riotous or become violent because there'd be people intentionally going into stores, breaking windows, like crashing things, all that type of stuff. And the protesters that were actually there for the right reasons are yelling at them to stop, because at the end of the day, people were looking at a Black Lives Matter protest, they were seeing the destruction, seeing the riots, and it's being like, oh, this is what Black Lives Matter protests are, this is what it stands for, and this is what it means. And they were only seeing the negative side of it because of maybe one or two people that were causing those things, or a group of people going into these protests causing those things to happen. So that's why I say not everyone that was there at a protest was there for the right reasons. Protesters were met with tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets. Many protesters will be arrested, taken into custody, or went missing. The National Guard was deployed for some protests. Many of these protests, to my knowledge, were organized ahead of time. And of course, the media tried to paint these protests in a negative light with a false narrative, you know, calling us thugs, criminals, you know, violence, you know, all those types of things. I feel like the media played a big part in how people that don't necessarily use social media saw the Black Lives Matter movement, because they were only seeing one angle of it. I feel like a lot of times the media this past summer wanted people to believe that all of these protests were just violent, we're just trying to act, you know, rebellious, and we're going rogue and all that. And I feel like they tried to paint such a negative picture, but they didn't see, when you got on social media and you have videos of protesters actually there on the front lines, and you're seeing them being peaceful, they're just trying to protect each other, you know, and all those things, and just standing up for what they know is right. There's so many people, especially a lot of older people, that maybe they aren't on social media, that did not get to see that side of the Black Lives Matter protest. But on Twitter, really say especially, it was just a hotspot, because you could see almost everything from every single angle. And, you know, just thank God for the internet. If we simply had to go off strictly what the news said, I completely understand why some people maybe had the wrong idea about Black Lives Matter. But if you guys go through and you watch that thread that I linked in the description box, you're going to see just how they were treated. So let's talk about how the protesters at Capitol Hill were treated, okay? These people waltzed right into the Capitol as if it was a field trip to a museum. Took pictures with the police. Some barriers were opened by the police so that protesters could get in and get closer to the premises. Protesters were escorted down the steps after storming the Capitol. And of course, this seems like it was all planned. You can see pictures of people wearing apparel specifically meant for that day. Lastly, what does this mean? Okay, so we've gone through and come with comparison and contrast against these two main events that have happened, right? So what in essence does this mean for us? Number one, what happened at Capitol Hill proved that white supremacy is real and their behavior is condoned. President Trump refused to condemn white supremacy during the presidential debate. So, I mean, there's that. Number two, white privilege allows you to walk into the Capitol as if it were your own home. Number three, white privilege means you don't have to fear the police because they are your friends. Like I said, some of the protests in Capitol Hill were taking pictures with the police, with the National Guard. They're just up, posted up for the gram, for the snap, like, hey, we out here, like, bro, what? And I literally tweeted myself, I said, no one can tell me that if there were a Black Lives Matter protest going on, that we would not have been met with pepper spray or rubber bullets and tear gas, or simply they would have just shot us dead on sight. That really is what it is. You can't tell me that that would not have happened. I think the headlines for what happened at Capitol Hill, if it were a Black Lives Matter protest, would have been extremely different. I believe headlines would have been massacre at Capitol Hill. I just feel so strongly about the fact because these situations were so different that the outcome of these and the way they were handled would have been differently as well. Number 4, white privilege allows you to behave in a violent, riotous manner with nearly next to no consequences. Now, there have been 13 arrests made, and there were 4 people that were brutally injured. I think 4 people were shot, and one of those 4 did pass away. Now that I've named things of what white privilege allows you to do and what it means, lastly, what happened at Capitol Hill is just further proof that we have a lot more work to do before we are at a place where Black lives actually matter, where they're actually going to be changing the system, where people are going to be held accountable. What happened at Capitol Hill, despite there being all the security and it shouldn't have been so easy to get into, it just proves that even though the country spent like 700 and I think it was a 50 billion on defense, it's not that they couldn't protect the Capitol, it's just simply that they didn't want to. And I just want to take an episode to talk about that because it's something that clearly, if you follow me, it's been at the forefront of nearly everything I posted about. So the last few days, I've kind of calmed down, I've simmered down a little bit, but I just want to take some time to kind of do a little comparison and contrast of those things. Try to do this in like one take all the way through. I'm not even quite sure if I like it, so I hope this is clear and concise and makes sense. I hope all the links work. But before we go, our culture tag. KTSC, what does it stand for? My guess is keep that same energy. Okay, so let's see what the correct answer is. And what do you know? It's keep that same energy. Okay, if you got it right, let me know in the comments. That is it for this episode of TalkToMeNice podcast. Please be sure to follow me on Instagram so you can keep up with all things going on with the channel. Please sure to hit that please sure to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe. And whatever you do, not forget to click that bell so that you get notified every single time that I post. I am going to try my best to do 1 episode a month for you guys. I'm really going to try and hopefully things will get smoother as we go throughout this year. Thank you guys for love and support, and I will see you next time with another video.